31st, 2019, meeting of the Law Committee to order. First item on the agenda is to review the minutes of our last meeting. Have you all had a chance to review them?
Yes.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good, thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to take some items out of order to try to speed things along here. We have Judge Herrick with his clerk present, and if you don't mind, I'd like to ask if we could take items 26 and 27. May I have a motion?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Judge Herrick on item 26, if you may, please.
This is a request on behalf of the Public Defender's Office, the Alternative Public Defender's Office, and the 18B Administrator to get legislative approval to file for a non-competitive grant with the Office of Indigent Legal Services for up to $786,729 over 3 years to Albany County to pay for expenses relative to indigent criminal defendants. That would include any expenses, some salaries or portions of salaries, training, equipment, materials, continuing legal education. It continues proceedings or procedures that have preceded this Distribution 9, and we're just requesting at this time legislative permission to apply for it.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Mr. Combs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Judge, is there anything better than a grant of this nature?
Anything better than that?
Yes. A non-competitive, independent grant.
No. Is that a trick question?
No trick question.
Not that I'm aware of.
That's okay. Then I would make a motion that we approve this.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Bergdorf. Motion by Mr. Kraus. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Item 27, I believe, is yours as well.
That's Bruce.
27?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, Your Honor.
No, Bruce is going to take that one.
Thank you, Mr. Hidley.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the Law Committee. I appreciate being here tonight. I'm here tonight because I'd like permission to apply for a grant with the Local Government Records Management Improvement Fund. The total amount of the grant is going to be $149,945. This grant is a shared services grant that we'll be applying for with the town of Colony. We are going to apply to take care of our pistol permits, to get them all digitized and put on the computer. And with the town of Colony, there are several areas that we're going to be working with them on to digitize their records, including all of their vital statistic records, some building department records, and some other areas that are important to the town of Colony. This is, once again, the maximum amount we can apply for in this grant is $150,000, so I think we've just about maximized that amount for the grant, and I'm really excited about this. This grant cycle will be for 2019 and 2020, and if approved by the Law Committee and the Legislature, we would know sometime in June or early July whether we receive this money.
Any questions? May I have a motion? Mr. Feeney, seconded by Mr. Higgins. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Pass unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it very much.
Thank No, not yet. If we may, let's move on to item 25 on the agenda. May I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Dean. In a second. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
What are we on?
We're the motion to move to item 25, the Board of Elections, given the number of people who are in attendance for that.
You need a motion to take it out of order. You had a second. I will need all those in favor.
Okay. Those in favor to take this item out of order?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. The county executive office is requesting the approval from the county legislature to move the Board of Elections to 260 South Pearl Street. I would suspect that any time after the primary season. We know that since the state has moved petitioning up, that it would be, I'm assuming, pretty onerous on Board of Elections, so anytime after the primary, like July 1, would seem like a reasonable date. But I also would like to talk about some of the points in the Board of Elections memo, and I'm not sure. The first point, I think, is brought up that DGS had, removed their RLA. The DGS was requested by council to remove that RLA because they thought it was redundant. So it wasn't anything that our office did, and we agreed. We said if you think it's redundant, we'll remove it. The other thing in the memo I just wanted to point out, the square footage is not as a large a gap I think people may believe. The 24,000 square feet that's in the current lease includes about 75 parking spots. If you take out those parking spots, that brings that square footage to about 20,400 square feet. In the DMV building that we're proposing is about 19,100 square feet. So it's, we're talking about 1,600, I think I had a calculation, about 1,600 square feet difference. I think it's gross. And I think, I also brought Rich Kempanola from CT Mail. He had done the space planning study that's attached to the RLA. I thought if anybody had any questions, technical questions regarding codes, Rich would be able to answer those questions. So, I'm here for any questions.
Very good. Mr. Bullock?
How many machines, voting machines are required for storage? What's the capacity on that?
200.
200? Okay, and we're not talking about the liver machines any longer. We're talking about something that compacts up, right?
Correct.
Okay.
They would all be stored in the front area of the, if people are familiar with DMV, that front area on the plan, that would be, all your storage would be right there in front for easy movement in and out of the building.
Mr. Bullock,
the lobby area actually is now before the move.
it's on the last page of the RLA.
Based on the plans on the RLA.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Mr. Feeney?
Do you have any idea what the cost of the project is going to be, both for renovation and the expected cost for the moving the equipment?
Sure, I gave my notes to Mr. Bullock, but I think in the study it says minimal, but our best guess is only between $50,000 to $100,000.
For the renovation and the move?
Oh, for the move, I don't know what it would cost for the move. Did we?
Well, DGS never really, we don't move the equipment. I think that the BOE actually moves the machines themselves. As far as a moving company, it probably would reach maybe in that 100,000, it would probably be included in that 100,000, the move would be in there. When we're talking about a minimal renovation there, we're only removing a couple of walls to build a new lobby area on the second doorway where the judge's entrance was at DMV. So that's only going to be developed, so there's probably about 4 or 5 walls we're probably going to be removing out of there, maybe adding 1 or 2 walls. We feel that there should not really be any HVAC work. The sprinkler system is up and operating, so there will be no work on sprinkler systems. Data should be still available there from the DMV building back to the tele rooms that would be kicked back. So there's not a lot of renovation work that's gonna go on there, very minimal abatement work from when we pull down the walls and just rebuild it. So I would think safely, you know, within that 100,000, we should include the move.
Mr. Kraus, I think, was next.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I've read the memo from the board, and they're both, commissioners are in agreement that they don't believe this is the most favorable move for the Board of Elections. One of the issues that's raised is with the new election law changes that we've seen signed into law in rapid succession now. With early voting, things of that nature. They do mention that if that site is used for one of the areas where people can come in and vote, that will involve space. And there are other, I think, unknown concerns about space requirements as a result of these election law changes that they're not easy to predict right now. And so I have a concern that we may be moving into a facility that really today might seem fine, but when everything plays out, might not be. And then we've made the move. And personally, I like the central location, whether it's in Colony or Gilder, wherever it is. But I think a central location for a Board of Elections is critically important for everyone to have the same kind of access. And while I understand this is a county building and available, and that's wonderful, but I don't think it addresses some of these other concerns that are legitimate concerns. So I'd like to know how you would respond to that.
187, that's central.
Well, I agree with Mr. Bullock. I think the DMV's location is a good location. I think it's quick for people in Colony. I think it's good for people, you know, maybe in Ravenna, Port of Lee, Green Island, the Host. It's just as quick for them to jump on 787 and right down there. So I think it's a great location, centrally located for people.
Well,
I mean, it's
maybe.
inconvenient for Colony people, maybe, Guilderland, but I mean, it's good for other folks.
But I think you have to take the whole county into perspective here. And again, it doesn't have to be in Colony, but I think a central geographical location is important. But that aside, the other issues about the concerns with the voting changes in the voting laws and the election laws.
Well, that's, you know, as far as, you know, the moving up the dates and petitioning and all that, I agree. I mean, that is coming quickly. That's why I thought after primary season would be a good time to do the move.
And the lease runs out, the current
I believe
lease?
it's April, end of April.
April, May.
I believe I have Mr. Higgins next, if you're...
No, that's good for now. Go ahead, Mr.
I think you just answered my one question, George, about when the lease expires. Just to follow up on that, is there a holdover provision in the lease to go month to month?
I believe so. Yes,
No?
there is.
Is that the same rate
It's the same
otherwise? And how much is the lease annually?
Listen,
Chris, it's about 320,000.
it looks like it's $334,148.
So that, after the move, that's recurring net savings to the taxpayer, almost $325,000.
So, you know, DMV.
Or those are costs that could pay for early voting.
What's that?
I said those are savings that could pay for early voting.
There you go.
Let's solve that problem in this county.
Doesn't solve the space problem.
Next on.
I was going to ask, those are one-time costs that you mentioned, the costs of the move and the renovation and whatnot. So I kind of am where Chris is. You know, this is a lease that the county doesn't own versus a building the county does own. That seems like a no-brainer. I also, with respect to Mr. Kraus's comment about all of the changes that are going to require the county and every county in the state to rethink their whole layout, I actually think that's a huge opportunity, because I would argue that the current Board of Elections site would probably want to do a lot of thinking if they were to stay there about renovation to meet the needs of all of the new early voting and so forth. So I guess I see it as an opportunity that moving into a space where you can get with a team and think about how best to lay out your new space, you have to renovate it anyway, thinking that through, I think it's probably, the result of that is probably going to be a nicely set up space. The other thing I would say about the location, the teenager test, I've sent teenagers to go to the Board of Elections. My same teenagers have driven to DMV. Guess which place they get lost and I get the phone calls. The little place that sort of looks like you're going into Home Depot, but you're really not. I don't think that's atypical. I think that it's a little bit hidden. DMV, maybe there's more motivation to go to DMV, but it's certainly a very visible and easy to get to right off 787. If you're stuck on Central Ave, sometimes I've been stuck, we've all been stuck in traffic on Central Ave. I mean, I guess I would argue the opposite of the inconvenience that I think, you know, the DMV is a great location right off of 787, kind of easy to get to.
And I just wanted to add something, like when we started doing the remodeling down there, I am sure we would be involved to say, hey,
oh, sure.
Could you do this? So it's not like they're not going to have any input.
Mr. Burkhardt?
I'm just sort of amazed that, you know, of all the things that we agree and don't agree upon, we have the two people that are running the Board of Elections that we have charged with the responsibility to make sure that they can run fair and efficient elections, and they're telling us that his site does not meet our needs. But yet somehow, if I read this memo correctly, with not a lot of consultation from the Board of Elections, because they say that they were not really consulted about the, oh, excuse me, let me finish.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just kind of saying what it says in the memo. Sure. over their objections, if you will. It is suggesting that they move down there and it doesn't fulfill their needs. So I'm not sure that we would do this to any other department. I have the same sort of concerns about location because, and you know, hey, you know, I'm from Colony. We have 54,000 voters. The city of Albany has 47,000 voters. And you have a site that is smack in the middle on the boundary line of Colony and Albany, and it's over 50% of the voting population, right there. And it's right off of I-90. And now I also have commissioners who are telling us that the amount of square footage that they have now is greater than what they would have at DMV, and that there has not been a calculation made for all these new voter activities, early voting. One of the things I'm told is this will be an early voting center.
I'd like to address.
Excuse me, well, you can address anything you want when I get done. This is going to be an early voting center because you have to have one for every 50,000 people, and your headquarters should. So you're going to, I guess, for some population of 50,000 people or less, I mean, maybe we'll have our own in Colony, and maybe the city of Albany and Bethlehem would take this, where all their folks will have to go for 9 days from all over their municipalities, and that's where their inspectors will have to get trained. But when the two commissioners say that it does not meet their needs, I'm not sure we would be doing that to other commissioners, because other commissioners are not independent. our election commissioners are appointed by the legislature, not by the county executive. So I personally would like to see a reconciliation with the commissioners, and I'm not going to vote on anything until we have two commissioners that can tell me that they can run fair and impartial elections with the adequate resources. Because everybody is concerned about voter increase and voter participation. Why would you take 10 pounds of voters and put them in a 5-pound sack because we have an empty building? I think we have a bigger responsibility to Albany County, and we need to do this right. We also have an opportunity to bill back some of our election costs to make sure that there's a sharing of the burden of fair and impartial elections. So I would really urge the county executive to find a way to work with the two commissioners to come up with a consensus. And that's what I'll address for now.
Thank you, Mr. Herdrow. I have Mr. Mayo, Mr. Fine, Mr. Higgins again, in that order, if that's all right. Mr. Mayo.
George, I know in the past few years, the landlord at Russell Road was not interested in selling, but with his feet to the fire now, with the tenant possibly moving out, does he have any interest in selling to the County of Albany?
I don't know that. I don't know.
Okay. And as far as the fit-up costs or whatever, is there a breakdown anywhere? I know, somebody stood up and said it'll be 50 or 100,000. But
yeah, I mean that's our best guess. I mean, CTML did their space plan. They said it'd be minimal, so we're estimating between 50 and 100,000.
But do we have a?
No, nothing yet, because we didn't want to have CTML go further into detail if the legislature isn't going to approve the move.
I want to make sure we take that opportunity to speak with the gentleman from CTML as well this evening.
Thank you.
Mr. Funk.
Thank you. I want to address the location issue since it's located in my district. I see this as a much better and centrally located location than the current Board of Elections. It's right off 787. It's in downtown Albany. It steps from county offices, from city offices, from state offices. This is where most government buildings are located. There is it's right centrally located on bus lines. So I think it's really a great location for people to get to. It's not going to be perfect for everyone. It's impossible to find a location that's perfect for everyone, but you also have population living in my district and communities around the Board of Elections, less likely to own cars, so it's more difficult for them to get to Colony, to the border of Albany and Colony where the Board of Elections currently is than it is for someone from Colony where higher population of people own cars to get to a place downtown here. I think I don't think we're just doing this because the space opened up. Space opened up and it seems to be a perfect fit, so I don't see why we wouldn't move forward with it.
Mr. Higgins? Mr. Sweet.
This question goes to the gentleman from CT Mail. You measured the size of the building down at DMV, correct? And
correct.
Did you measure the size of the building where the BOE currently exists?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And
we did a space planning comparison between each of the room spaces.
And the building where they are is how big compared to not including the parking places?
Not including parking spaces, there's roughly 1,600 square feet gross area difference. In total, what we found is the utilization of the space. The DMV space actually turned out to be a better utilization of space because less corridors, less space, the large open spaces to accommodate the equipment. When we look at things for space planning, it's also life safety and accessibility. The DMV met both of those requirements. One is a sprinkler building versus non-sprinkler, ADA accessible toilet rooms for the public, which doesn't exist in the current space.
Okay, thank you. And George, one more. The timeline, again, you guys are figuring what, sometime even when you do all the bidding and all the things you have to do, go through all the procedural requirements, get this place, you're thinking, what, definitely summer, fall?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. We think we get it all fitted up and then have the move after the primaries.
Okay.
Mr. Grant, how long would the move take? How long would the move take, do you estimate?
The actual moving of the machines, or you mean like?
From stopping operations on Russell Road to starting operations at the MJ building?
I don't know what the.
Mr. Higgins?
I'd just like to make, I don't know if it's possible to make an
I
amendment.
think it could be done in a phase, so you really wouldn't lose any time up there. As we move, we could phase get a lot of the stuff down there, get them ready, and then when it's ready to go, get it all moved in a day down there, so they really wouldn't lose time as far as being open or closed. We could work on a phasing program for that doing the move.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Higgins?
I would just suggest if we're gonna move this out, that we amend the resolution when it does come to the floor to make it effective, after the primary recanvass is completed, in order to provide them with that time and build it into the resolution itself.
Mr. Kraus?
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Question for the gentleman from CT Mail. When you were doing your analysis of the space and the corridors and what would be involved, did you have conversations with the commissioners about how all that would work and their perspective on those changes?
When we were at the space, they toured us and guided us to explain the use of each of the spaces.
Their space? No, I mean, did you have a conversation with them about the potentially new space and get their reaction as to how that would work? Is there a reason why you didn't do that?
That was in one of our past items.
Well, it would seem to me that if you're going to, and again, this isn't directed at you or anybody in particular, but if you're going to have people move into a new space, why wouldn't you say to them, again, not you, this is what we have planned, is this going to work for you? I mean, to me, that would just be a natural thing to do.
I'm sorry, Mr. Krause, to interrupt. We did invite Mr. Klein down, and he was very emphatic he wasn't going. We had a meeting in my office, I think, September, and he said, we're not going. And that's why they didn't join us down there when CT Mail went. So they were invited.
That's not accurate. That's not accurate.
Excuse me, Richie, you weren't at the meeting.
Correct, because there was a preliminary meeting, right, you were neither. There was a request to meet in his office just to discuss what specifically, I'm not sure. There was never any mention of CTML being there to discuss the lay of the land or the plans itself. I actually was dealing with a personal issue in my house. I had a flood in my house, so as you can imagine that was kind of a priority. So Matt did go, and then I did follow up with an email saying I'd be happy to meet and discuss this at any time. They did show up at our office to take, I guess, measurements or whatever it was, to view our layout. Nothing was really discussed when they were on site. It was very brief, and we did not discuss our needs in terms of future moving forward. The one thing that I really need to stress here, which I don't want sort of to fall through the cracks because it's vitally important that you understand this. The legislation that was enacted in the state legislature requires one voting so-called supercenter per 50,000 voters, okay? The city of Albany alone has that perfect amount. It has 47,000 voters. That's one voting center for the city of Albany. So what you need to assess, and it's going to be the Board of Elections, and the legislation itself even says it should be the Board of Elections, okay? And it should be staffed by the Board of Elections. One thing you have to really ask yourself, if you're a legislator representing constituents and voters in the city of Albany, separate from the concerns of suburban county legislators, is do you foresee an area in the plans that they laid out that are in front of you where you can imagine 50,000 voters are potentially going to be walking and going over the course of 9 days to our facility? And so the problem is that there is a storage place that they laid out in the plan for 200 machines. Only a very minimal amount is actually going to be rolled out for early voting, because the whole point of early voting is consolidated voting, okay? In addition to other reasons. And so we don't have space under the current plans for 50,000 voters over the course of 9 days to come and vote. And so it's not just the building that presents the challenge, okay? It's the parking itself. And you're competing with parking there with other county facilities. And so while maybe now, in your mind, the layout works as it currently pertains to our board, which we disagree with for a variety of other reasons, the point is, rather than go back in terms of square footage and scaling back at square footage, if anything, the new electoral reforms require us to actually increase the amount of square footage we need in order to properly conduct our operations and to do it efficiently and in the best way. And so this is not a political issue. This doesn't extend to any other issue. It's an issue of practicality. Do you really honestly believe that 50,000 voters in the city of Albany, who by the way are predominantly Democrat, okay, want to go to a building where you have to be squeezed into a small space, which I don't even know where in the current layout of the plan you're going to be able to have that, where you actually have several machines set up and tables and people to wait and have lines to go and vote, and including the sufficient parking to do that over the course of 9 days. So that is a very real and serious concern. And so the locations that we've been touring have not only addressed concerns that have been raised to us in terms of being centrally located or in terms of paying less in terms of square footage, but we are actually looking at facilities that provide an increase in square footage in order to accommodate early voting concerns. Also, the machines that we currently have are going to have to essentially be phased out because they don't work. You can't have multiple ballot styles at one voting center. It has to be done electronically. And so boards are now moving to a different system because of the new requirements. And that also includes, by the way, electronic poll books. So everything that you'd imagine our operation to be now is going to be completely changed within the course of the year. The electoral reforms, we are required to implement them for the November election, not for the primary, okay? So even if you move immediately after the primary, you still have to be able to establish a whole new system countywide and have it in place for the November election. So this is a very complicated and delicate process that requires a lot of thought. And, you know, to have this as part of a cost-saving measure, I can understand that. But at the same time, we provide an essential government service, and sometimes you have to pay for an essential government service. And so, not only is the location itself a concern in terms of being centrally located and other issues, you have to imagine that 50,000 residents of the city, voters in the city of Albany, are going to be going down to that location over the course of 9 days.
Thank you, Commissioner Leddy. Mr. Higgins had a...
Yeah, I just want to respond to some of the statements regarding the early voting, since I was one of the lead negotiators on the bill. Several of the things you said are not accurate. Specifically, the bill and the legislature in its infinite wisdom built in specific factors for the early voting sites that must be met. I would argue that your current location as the voting supercenter off Russell Road wouldn't qualify, quite frankly, as one of those sites, if it were to be evaluated.
Do you think the comparison is to our current location?
If I may just
Or
remind
the current
everyone in the
location,
room.
because there's not an alternative right now.
If I may remind everyone in the room, if you're not a member of the committee, kindly raise your hand in order to be recognized to speak. Well, thank you.
And
Mr. Higgins.
I would just note on the second point that the bill specifically allows for the assignment of election districts to specific early voting sites so that you don't have an issue with the ballots, the different ballot styles.
Wait, say that again?
And that's permissive, and you guys can do that so that you don't have to have the ballot styles for the entire county at one specific early voting site.
No, can you repeat what you said?
What you said about needing to switch the machines
Yes.
to accommodate all these multiple ballot styles to
Correct.
accommodate early voting is not accurate, because the bill specifically built in language for the assignment of specific election districts, which would represent districts, to specific early voting sites. So you could do that way you wouldn't have to have every ballot for the town of Colony and the town of Guilderland at one site in the city vault, for example.
Right, no, I understand that. Yeah, I didn't say that. But what I said
Okay,
is,
well, I'm just-
nonetheless, the city of Albany, for example, has more than one county legislature.
Sure.
So that's multiple ballot styles, as you can imagine.
But so you can have all the races for the city of Albany here. And that would-
Correct,
yeah.
correct.
All right, well, I don't want to
I'm
get.
on the same page with you on that,
Okay,
yeah.
I don't want to get into a back and forth about the early voting. That's
Are there
just
more? Sorry.
a point about where you're currently located
Right.
versus a different location.
Right, I guess-
I would argue those factors
But my point is, the comparison doesn't necessarily have to be made to our current location.
Sure.
I think our
In
current
the out
location
years.
does not necessarily meet the requirements, honestly, potentially of the new voting requirements, early
Okay.
voting. So
I think
my
we've
point is to
understood.
explore other locations before, make decisions are made in haste.
Thank you. Mr. Fine?
I would just like to hear Mr. Penn or the representative from CTML respond to Ms. Buddy's concerns about how this would fit with early voting, the proposed DMV site.
Mr. Kemp,
If it would be able to
like to
come-
join us at the table?
Turn it over to Rich. As far as the parking goes, I mean, we had to guarantee DMV down there 100 parking spaces right in front there. So the parking is not going to be a problem there, I don't believe so. There's actually more parking than there would be on Russell Road. There's actually 4 ways out, or actually 3 ways out of that parking lot to get to different areas out of that parking lot as far as any kind of congestion as far as parking goes. CT Mail, when we did this was just a rough space plan to make sure that everything that they had would fit that they have now. When we're ready to do the design, we welcome Rachel and Matt to come and sit down with us and develop something that they think would work a little bit better. This is just, if we have to move forward, this needs to go through.
Are there more questions for Mr. Penn? Mr. Kraus?
Yes, Mr. Penn. Given that you've indicated that you think the best time to do this is after the primary, which is June, what's it, June 25th?
Yes.
June 25th. I mean, that would be your preference, because it would make it easier for everyone in...
Well, I nobody wants to see any of their operations.
Well,
Right, so Sean was just clarifying that we're talking, all the build-up would be done before that. We
Right.
would start that.
but given the time frame, wouldn't it be a consideration perhaps to look at other sites? I think the folks at the Board of Election have already indicated that the Russell Road site may not be able to accommodate what they need, but we have a little time, I think some work's been done already on exploring other sites. Isn't that something we perhaps should consider?
I think we have the perfect site, you know?
So you don't think we should do that?
No, I think we have a good site.
Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham?
You're welcome.
Transitions are hard. People don't necessarily like to move. It's
Tell me about it.
uncomfortable. But you also have the opportunity, and I did an office move that was uncomfortable, but you also have the opportunity, particularly if you're moving into a space where you have a lot of liberty with how you are constructing the internal space, which is a huge opportunity. I'm sure there's a lot of wasted space in a current office building that probably hasn't been rehabbed or reconfigured in, I don't know how many years. So with, you know this in your own house. If you do a renovation, you can take the same square footage, and when you renovate, all of a sudden it looks like it's a third bigger. So, I still think this is a huge opportunity where we have a space. I haven't heard anybody suggesting that we need to, I guess maybe it's a consideration, move to a much larger space. I think the first thing to do is examine an existing county-owned facility that's now empty and think about how we can perhaps be creative about the space, which I'm sure there's going to be huge opportunity to do that, especially with the help of our commissioners. And I just want to ask, what are the next steps on this? Anybody know, you guys?
Next steps, I think, after committee, right, does it fall? Once it gets passed, DGS is going to...
If it gets passed, George.
If it gets passed.
Being a little presumptive.
I'm optimistic. And then CTML will get to work with the contract through DGS
Right, and
to
that's,
do their
we'll
space
bring
plan.
Rachel
We'll talk to Rachel and Matt.
See, with the plan, we can adjust the plan to their needs or whatever they're thinking that they might want, or if they think they have a need for the early voting space, can we create it in the front, maybe move the machines back a little bit and create an early voting spot there? There's a lot of things that, like I said, the space planning was just to make sure that it fits. The plan now, for their need, they're gonna have to, cooperation with us, and CT Mail to sit down and develop their plan accordingly.
I guess for my own benefit, I would love to see that next step, like looking at the space and kind of dreaming what it could look like. That would be helpful.
Mr. Higgins?
I'd like to make a motion to move it out without recommendation, subject to the amendment I referenced, that no move physically take place until the primary recanvass is completed and certified by the Board of Elections.
Are we no longer able to have any discussion on this?
Well, there's a motion on the table, so if there's a second, then we would vote on that.
I know.
But
do you have more? I'll wait, Paul, if you want to ask some more questions.
Well, yeah, I was
I don't want to be
going.
here for hours. I got to go back to work.
You know, it's a personal problem. You know, it strikes me that we should not do anything before November of this year, okay? To try to shoehorn, nothing can happen before primary, and probably with everything that happens after primary, between primary and the general, with early voting, et cetera, you know, you're right, this is a transition year. We don't, as we sit here now, I hear that CT Mail went in and they looked at the space, and they looked at their space, they came up with a plan which they say is not workable. Also, since that point in time, there was a very large change in the election law that structurally magnifies the role of Board of Elections. I can't possibly envision that everything that they do can be done in less space than they have now. Perhaps it can. But how we would not have the ability, before this committee goes forward and says, go ahead, move it down there, without knowing that it's possible or makes sense, is sort of beyond me. I think that the two commissioners should have an opportunity to really review CT Mail's proposal, that they should have an opportunity to talk about what real early voting needs are, and tell us, are you going to need an extra 7,000 square feet, an extra 10,000 square feet, whatever. So maybe instead of 17,000 square feet, you need 30,000 square feet or 27,000, and maybe you shouldn't be shoehorned into 15,000 because that's what we have available. We wouldn't do this to any other department. We wouldn't. And, you know, I personally am not thrilled with the location because, to be very honest with you, it seems to be in an area which serves over 50% of the electorate. So, you know, there seems to be some common sense there. But how we would move this forward without knowing truly what the impact is on Board of Elections is beyond me. So I would ask that you know, rescind your motion and let there be some time for the county executive's office and the commissioners to really sit down and come up with a matrix of what's necessary. Why should we rush forward to make a mistake? Especially if there is no real positive in this for before November, and we can be on a month-to-month.
No, I mean, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I mean, here's the reality. For every month that they stay there after April, that is incurring loss to the taxpayer of savings, right? So, I mean, that's one issue. And the second issue is, even if you were to delay this after November, after they certify the primary results, they're going to have to turn around and start preparing for the presidential primary, which is the following year, which is one of the reasons why we didn't make the early voting, you know, effective as a trial run in 2020, right? Like, we thought about these things. I mean, in that capacity. So, I mean, everybody has an opinion. I think everybody has an idea of what they want to do here. Moving it out without a recommendation, subject to that amendment, I think is a fair, you know, solution at this point in time. I mean, April is a hard deadline. We're going into February. That's just my thinking of it. So, I mean, members can have a vote. We'll vote on it. We'll see where it goes.
The motion has been seconded, has not been withdrawn. I think we need to move forward with the vote on it. All those in favor?
Aye. Who's opposed? Raise your hand. How's that? 2, 3.
3 opposed, 4 in favor.
5 in favor.
Mr. Bullock, I didn't see.
I didn't.
Mr. Bullock is not on the committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He just acts like you.
I'm taking notes.
You just act like you.
I know.
We need that vote from you as well.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
If you want to amend it down, that's another. Technically,
It's up to you.
No, I will vote in favor. I think it's, I don't want them pushed out before primaries. It is a tight schedule to get it fitted in before the November elections. But again, there's never a good time for a major shift like this. I am concerned that it meets their needs. I think I'm going to have to trust the process that between CT Mail and that will get further developed and clarified. If it's an absolute hard stop that it will not meet their needs, then we might have to come back to the table on this. But at this point, I think CT Mail has demonstrated that the space is sufficient. It's not overwhelming. It is smaller. So I definitely hear their issues, but I think I will err on the side of voting in favor. Resolution passes. Yeah, without recommendation. Move it to the floor. If we could move to item 21 and 22, for Legislator Smith, may I have a motion?
I'll make motion.
Second? Thank you, Mr. Kraus. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Smith, if you would please.
Man, I always wonder what it's like to be at this end. Yeah, local you, I'm just here for county exec, so we can enter a lease agreement for 25 years for high-speed internet in the Hilltowns. This is about a 3-year project. It started with Craig Apple's tower. When they put it up, they left 3 other spots, or I believe 2, 3. And this is one of the companies that wants to put internet on.
Motion.
Second by
One second, this is just for the public hearing.
Public hearing,
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
So number 21.
Okay, so number 21.
So a motion, you need a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Sweeney, second.
Can I just ask a question to the council?
I'm sorry.
No, it's on the general subject of public hearings. We had 4 public hearings which were canceled last week. 5. When, do we have a thought as to when we're going to reschedule them to?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Bergdorf, we, the chairman, as council, and ourselves, through the individual exchange today, as you know, it occurs at noon. All of those resolutions, and including Tim, put in for your members, those public hearing resolutions, again, as individual items. And for the committees, because we don't have time for the committees to meet, they're going to be put in by the chairman. Those are going to be presented as individual resolutions in the February 11th meeting, and they can be voted on. They've already been discussed, so they can be voted on to go forward for February 26th.
So February 26th, so.
And we need to amend this resolution, which may be your point, well, not to speak for.
That was my question. Are we adding a 6th?
No, we're going to need to amend, before you move this forward, members of the committee we need a motion to amend Resolution 527 to reflect the appropriate date, which is February 26th, 2019.
May I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
And a second.
Mr. Mayo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All in favor of passing that as amended, Stefan?
Aye.
Need a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Sorry, motion by Mr. Sweeney. Seconded by, thank you, Joanne. And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. 21 is moved forward unanimously.
It's tabled.
22 is, okay, and then 22 is tabled pending the public hearing. Thank you. Other items that are tabled, let's go down the list.
What happened to 24?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, sorry.
We haven't, yeah,
We've been taking things out of order, so. Now we're gonna go back to the beginning. Yeah.
Items that are tabled, get your pens ready.
Yeah.
1, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 has been withdrawn. 11 tabled, 12, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. All right, so that brings us to?
No, just
Where
Chairman.
are we?
22.
Yes.
Table, pending public hearing.
Boy, now we're moving along.
Now we're moving. Cut it down
Two.
quite a
All
bit.
right. So, item number 2, local law G for 2018. Mr. Kale is not here, so this will be tabled. Number 3, Mr. Fine.
Gonna table that.
Okay, number 6.
I'll table that.
Alrighty. 14 and 15. Number 14. Mr. Fine, 14 and 15.
14 and 15, I'm gonna table both of those.
Wait, what did you do with 9?
9 was tabled.
9 was table pending.
It's a local.
Oh,
Okay,
you
the
want to
public
speak
hearing.
on it?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
She wants to speak.
Okay.
So, and this is not the public hearing, did we, is,
The public
We
hearing
haven't-
is item 24.
right, okay. So this is the actual local law.
Right.
Okay, okay, I do want to talk about this. So, local law O, I want to direct the committees, particularly our Republican colleagues who gave some suggestions, further refinements to local law O. I'm sure folks have noted that we accepted many of those, what I would call kind of, some of them just clarifications, some things, little tweaks, things that made the process seem to kind of run smoother, and some little clarifications. The one issue, and I want to understand this better, and I want to have this conversation now, and that goes to that section L. Mr. Kraus, I know you talked to our council today, and we had a brief conversation, but I want to understand better what we're looking at or aiming to think about here.
Sure. I think it's important that there be timeframes involved here and specific parameters involved. And this is probably one of the most difficult parts of the law, just to get your arms around, because the report of the independent commission to the legislature really needs to come to us. It has to be a local law for us to consider it.
Right.
And there may be some folks who haven't been as familiar with the process as Joanne and I have been, that might think that once the independent commission makes a recommendation, that's it. That's why we created an independent commission. Here it is, now do it. Well, that's really not the way it is. It will come to us. We will review it. If we have some concerns and changes we'd like to make, we need to have a system whereby we can alert the commission that these are concerns. You might want to look at this again, maybe give them a time frame, like 30 days to look at it, and then come back to us with their comments on the legislative changes. The legislature then, of course, can say, well, that's nice, but we don't want to do that. We're still going to move forward with what we think should be done. Even though, again, as I said, this is tough to get your arms around, I think we can craft that kind of language within the next 2 weeks to give us an opportunity to move forward with a public hearing as we had planned at the end of February, and have people come and comment on what I think will be an even better product. This has been a long, long haul for everybody here. and I honestly believe we are approaching the finish line.
There.
I don't want to cut any corners. I don't think anybody does. I would rather take the extra time, make sure it's right, because no one wants to face another round of lawsuits that the 3 past reapportionments have resulted in. And I think it's been a real bipartisan effort. I know, and I've worked with Joanne, and Joanne and I are different on a lot of different issues, but I think we both believe this is critically important and that it's done in such a way that it will survive any sort of challenges and hopefully create a situation where no one will want to challenge it because it's been done in a very constructive, independent way. And so, and I've had some conversations at the council.
No, the only thing I would ask, and Kevin and I had a quick conversation about this, but as you just explained it, it seems like it's a pretty kind of minor deadline kind of tweak. One of the things we talked about in a lot of detail was the fact that once this reapportionment report is presented, it's presented to the legislature in the form of a local law. And with that, all of the normal procedures and structural things that we have in place that govern how we handle local laws will apply, meaning we can amend it, we can kind of move it through the process as we see fit, much like we do any local law. So, so that's really why we made some of the changes on that section L. But I do wonder going to, so the issue is that we don't want this process to kind of languish. Sure. So we're looking for a hard deadline of when this process has to be done. Is that what we're thinking?
I can speak to that.
Yeah, do you mind?
Yeah, sure. So I've spoken to Joanne and Peter and a number of people, all the sponsors, a lot on this, Pat included, Brandon, and the one tweak that I think could be added to section L that would be definitely beneficial, and Joanne explained it perfectly, is this is going to come in as a local law. The first step will be to go to the committee. I think it would be wise to put in a time frame, a brief time frame, so that so it doesn't get held up in committee. And my suggestion and discussion with both Peter and Joanne is that we don't want this, if our backs are against the wall in terms of a time frame, to leave some amorphous, broad, you know, the committee can work on it as necessary. I mean, obviously they can, but we want to put in some sort of time frame to be clear that this local law goes forward to the full body for a vote on the initial introduction. And to Peter's point, if it were to be on that initial introduction rejected, we also would want to have a time frame, as Peter said, for the commission to consider the legislature's comments and amendments so that they can work together with the legislature. Again, have a time frame in there so you don't have some unclear, broad, you know, just work on it. I think it's smart to have some sort of time frame, and it adds to the process, as Peter and Joanne have both mentioned, to allow a lack of stumbling blocks when we get there in 2 years, or, well, not 2 years, but in some time. Yeah.
So would it be possible, actually I was kind of looking through this earlier, would it be possible to actually just, after we added, if such proposed local law is not adopted, to add something like, within 30 days, the commission shall be empowered to continue its work, blah, blah, blah? Or do we need something that's tighter than that, or?
I think if 30 days is the time frame you'd like, I mean, that's a choice of, 30 days makes sense to me, but you could have, if such proposed local law is not adopted, the commission should, and I'm looking at sub 2 of section L, the commission shall be empowered to continue its work through subsequent amendment processes to ensure legislative passage and enactment in a timely manner. And you would add something to the effect of the commission shall, you know, and I don't want to suggest too much language because it is your law.
Okay, you can suggest.
I would say, you know, the commission shall work through this subsequent amendment process and return the revised districts in the form of a local law within 30 days.
30 days, yeah.
Something to that effect for that portion. And I also would say earlier on into starting with no later than 30 days after receiving the final report, the chairperson of the county legislature shall submit to the county legislature the commission's final report in the form of a proposed local law. I would add something, and Brandon, feel free to jump in here, regarding the committee. It's going to go first, but it'll be referred to committee just like any other local law would. I would add something of a time frame, similarly a 30-day time frame in which the committee must just debate and return to the full legislature that local law. So have a time frame in there for that.
So you tighten it up in two ways.
Sure.
By
Right.
ensuring that the committee doesn't do nothing with it, and then ensuring that, should it fail, it comes back within 30 days.
Yes.
Okay.
I would recommend we have Kevin and Brandon come up with that language, share it with us as
Sure.
quickly as possible, so
Sure.
that we can then share it with our colleagues
Sure.
to make sure everyone's on board.
That's fine. I'll be really honest, though. I am ready for pencils to be down, and we've made a lot of changes, so I am actually comfortable with that amendment, and I want to move this bill out. I know we have a public hearing. We've already had 2 public hearings. We've had, I think, 3 speakers, 2 of which were the same speaker. I'm not thinking this 3rd public hearing is going to yield a lot of people showing up with lots of different ideas. I know we don't have to move it out, but honestly, I think we've done so much work on this. We can continue to refine and refine and refine all day long. So I would be comfortable
I think, Joanne, we should not move it out until we have the public hearing. And obviously, there are ways we can move it out quicker, but just procedurally for our body to be consistent with other local laws,
Okay.
we need to have the public hearing in February, and then the sponsors can discuss, at that point, alternative avenues for expediting the process if necessary.
Okay, the earliest it's going to be voted on the floor is in March anyway?
Correct.
Okay, and the law committee meeting in February is the end?
February.
I don't know if it's been set.
I would have to look at a calendar.
With the new schedule, it will come after
Right,
the
it'll come
public
after
hearing.
the public hearing. Okay, so I'm completely comfortable with that, but it will be moved out at the next law committee meeting. Win, lose, or draw, it's going. I think we all want to move on with our lives. We've been working on this for like 2.5 years, and it's ready.
Well, I can't guarantee that will
Okay,
happen,
yep,
but I
right.
believe it will happen, and there's one other thing I'd like to mention on this.
Sure.
We had, our members, the Republican minority, had some concerns with the 3, and 3 breakup of appointments. And I know that concerns have been expressed by the League of Women Voters on that as well. I know that you folks, you being the Democrats at the table, have decided that you're comfortable with a 3, and 3. Obviously, there are more of you than there are of us, but I still think it's an issue that we should think about. I don't anticipate that you will change your minds, but I wanted to make sure that you understood we're not completely satisfied with that, but we understand how compromise works here. So, moving down the line, we'll see what happens with it. We'll see how the public hearing, if there's any concern about that, and if there's enough of a concern, perhaps people will be open enough to reconsider it at that time. But if I am not stating what the position is of the party there, I wish someone would tell me differently. Is that, Mr. Majority Leader?
You're
Is that-
not stating it. You're stating it correctly.
I'm stating it correctly. Okay, just for the record, I wanted to make sure that that was where you're coming
333 is good. As far as I'm-
Well, I don't know if it's good, but it's...
No, as far as you're asking whether I think it's good and whether most of the Democrats,
No, I think that
yeah.
this is an issue that we've kind of evolved over time, and honestly, I think one of the things that I think about is somebody 30 years from now, when we're all gone, is going to be reading this as the governing statute that covers the redistricting process.
Okay.
So I sort of think that 333 kind of has it makes sense. It's not kind of goofy and, 522 or, I think it just makes sense. I think the world can change a lot in 30 years. We don't know what it will look like. We don't know who the majority leader is going to look like. You know, I don't think anybody envisioned that you'd have in the state Senate, you know, God rest their souls, the IDC in power for so long. But things can happen, and then things can change, and, you know, it just made sense, so.
I recognize Mr. Bordeaux.
Yeah, I will tell you, I'm not completely happy with this version, because I've seen an evolution of this bill going from what many of us in the beginning was hoping, and the title indicates that it was independent redistricting. And in my estimation, at 3, 3, and 3, it is no longer independent redistricting. It is political redistricting, where every appointee is appointed by someone or somebody that is elected to office. And I think we initially tried that, but we shouldn't pretend anymore. We shouldn't call this independent redistricting. Because I know I don't feel that way, and I know I speak for some of the other members, Republican and Democrat, who feel that way, is that we lost the essence of this bill. So with that, I guess it'll be what it'll be.
I would just like to address that. I think that, I think there's many, many elements of independence throughout this bill. There's also an entire exclusion section that is a pretty powerful exclusion section that I think makes it less of a political process and makes it inherently more credible. I think just because political leaders can appoint someone doesn't make it non-independent. It might without the exclusions, but the exclusions are going to eliminate an awful lot of people who won't be eligible to participate, and many of them are people connected to and very much entrenched in the political process themselves. So I wholeheartedly disagree with that statement. I think there's lots and lots of independence governing kind of elements to it, including and most importantly, you know, I mean, everything can be tainted a little bit. You know, just because you appoint 3 people and then they appoint a bunch of people doesn't mean that they're not going to appoint people that are inherently, you know, sort of tainted in some way. So, you know, I think that, I don't know, if you're the majority leader or minority leader or the chair, you're going to look at first who's off the list and then think about the credibility of the process, which it outlines an entirely different process, and you're going to make determinations about people who can actually fulfill the job description that's outlined in this. So, but I understand you don't agree.
If I may, could we turn to item 24 and have a motion to amend the date of the public hearing? Second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. And now a motion for moving on 581 as amended. Sorry, all right. All in favor of amending the date to February 26th?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, passes unanimously. And a motion, please, for passing 581 with the amended date. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Second by Mr. Duchek. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, passes unanimously.
Okay. 23.
Are we done?
23.
One more and 7.
One more.
What do we got left?
23.
Okay. Items 16 and 17 are Mr. Kale's, and those will both be tabled. Of absence. And number 23, at long last.
Sorry, I lost track.
Welcome, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. So I'm back again for this item. It's a property transfer to
So we foreclosed on a property for a minimal amount of money. That's very rare in our foreclosure process. It was $7,000 in an occupied structure, which is very unusual. We had to evict the occupant. Come to find out, this individual had been involved in a divorce proceeding in which she was supposed to receive this property, and due to a odd confluence of events, most notably the ex-husband's father had been the owner of the house and had been supposed to transfer the property to his son and died before doing so. So this item is meant to correct that situation. I've had some very constructive conversations with the Great Council Office. I want to make that clear. And I believe there are some concerns related to completing the action. We still would like to do so, but that's what I suppose I'm here to ask.
All right, so Mr. McLaughlin, I have a couple, it sounds like there's an estate of the father.
Yes.
And we're, instead of letting the house go to the estate, we're transferring it from the county to the ex-wife.
Well, we own the property now.
Okay.
Yeah, we have judgment of the property that our foreclosure proceeding kind of takes precedent over the taxes weren't paid. It certainly went past the last date of redemption. We control the structure.
Okay. Would, I think the best thing to do is get a formal opinion from the county attorney's office on this, because it does seem a little unusual and there's some concerns.
So any transfer that we do is run through the county attorney's office. We have the new policy that we would like a formal request from the legislature to the county attorney. The reason we asked that is because the county attorney was in a position where he was giving opinions on things that there was a misinterpretation. So if that could be put in writing to us, that would be best, just so we're getting the right information for you folks. But that's not a problem, we can get that.
Okay, and Ms. Cunningham?
Yeah, so just so I understand, and it's late and we kind of don't need to know all this dynamics, but it's going to the son?
No, it would go to, no, it would go to the, right.
The son.
It's going to the person
Yes, it would
that,
go to the son of the father who is the former owner, who we foreclosed on.
What about the wife?
Yeah.
Is she
And then it would go to, so in our disposition policy, this, if we transferred it to the wife, it would be a private sale. She's not the former owner. So to sell it back for the amount of taxes owed, it would have to go to the son who is the heir. Do you see what I'm saying? Because otherwise it would be a private sale, and since it's a saleable property, it would have to be for appraised value. So in order to reconstruct this, that's how it has to go.
Is there anything in legal writing that he has to transfer to his ex-wife after this goes?
Yeah, we would ask that language be added to
Could
the.
we just move this out, subject to a positive opinion of the county attorney?
can we do this?
We might need a motion to table pending the county attorney's opinion.
Yes, yeah. I'm sorry, say again, Jerome.
This is going, is the son the only heir?
Yes, that's my understanding, yes.
Yeah, I feel like we're playing surrogate's court.
Yeah, I mean, we are in an odd position.
I feel like Judge Judy.
There. Yeah, sure, yeah.
Do you have any proof from surrogate's court that this guy is the only heir?
To say that, I would be lying if I told you I had any documentation.
No, I'm not trying to give you a hard time,
No,
Mike,
no, I
but
know
I
you're
mean,
not. All
I just
have
can't take your
is-
word that that's the case. I'd like to see something in writing from the court or something that's all public documents, stuff from surrogate's court, that would prove to us that this guy's the only heir.
So at this point, I would also put forth this option. We do have a land bank, and if there are too many questions, and the legislators at the table, as well as generally in the body, deem this to be an overly complicated action, which I fully understand, I've been dealing with it for many months, we could simply run the transfer through the land bank, basically transfer the property to the land bank, and they would be in charge of managing a transfer. That being said, the land bank's purpose is to find the most suitable receiver for property, and it may come out that when the property goes to them,
the individual that we're trying to assist here isn't deemed to be that. So I'm just kind of in full disclosure, because again, majority council and us have been working hand in hand to try and figure out how to do this.
Just to speak on this, we have had a lot of discussions. There are questions legally as far as the propriety of transferring this property. I do recommend that the committee get a county attorney's opinion, which is already formally requested on this item, and it be tabled pending that county attorney's opinion. This has been sent back a number of times, and just to refresh the committee's memory, this was specifically sent back,
like he said.
specifically sent back to the law committee for this purpose.
We have a motion for Mr. Bergdorf.
I'll second
Motion's to table like he said.
Yes, I'll second
By
that.
Mr. Crown. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Motion to adjourn?
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn?